G'day guys, this is Tier and welcome back to another Fallout 76 video. The raids are finally here, in the game and out of the PTS testing. That means I can start bringing you guys all the guides and helpful tips and tricks you need to complete and master the raids for yourself. Also that you can farm for those prestigious 4-star effects and the new gear. This video is going to be going over each of the 5 stages in detail and showing exactly what the mechanics are and what objectives you have for each encounter. And I'll be showing you how to beat it with tried and tested methods so that you can easily farm this raid back to back with your group. Before jumping in, it's important that you guys know that it is highly recommended that you are to be higher level, at least above level 100, to really have a good chance at beating this raid. Now you can do it lower, you can be around level 75 or 50, but it's not recommended. You're going to be more equipped at level 100, you're going to have more perks, more gear, and just more experience. So yeah, around level 100 is the recommended level. And it's also important to mention that you will need a full team of 4 people all communicating and using the strategy I'll be telling you guys in this video. Sure, it's possible to beat the raid with 2 or 3 people, but it's easiest and recommended to do this with a full team. Now in future I'll be doing separate videos going further in depth on each encounter individually for you guys that do want more info, but for now, let's get the basics and the encounter understood and explained. Let's get into it guys. Okay, so the first encounter is here in the entrance room to the Enclave base. We will be fighting the EN06 Guardian bot, which is basically a gigantic turret. Now this can be quite a tough fight if you're not situated for battle with a tanky and hard-hitting build. I'll have more videos showing what builds work best for the raid, but for now if you're struggling to stay alive, I recommend using my Dreadnought Power Armor build. Find that in the description down below. Now, environmental notes to keep in mind. We have walls and catwalks with health bars that you can use to hide behind and take cover from the Guardian's fire. However, the Guardian will be able to take these things out eventually as it can damage them. So be wary of that and take note of the health bars if you are using these things as cover. There is also a blue electric puddle that will periodically be placed in the center room. Avoid that as it does extra damage to you when you're stood inside of it. Additionally, smaller, weaker turrets will appear periodically around the Guardian as well. These things aren't really that much of a threat, even though they fire large, intimidating lasers. They act more as cannon fodder, so you can either ignore them or take them out instantly. And finally, the Guardian itself. It has an instant death field around itself, so melee, unfortunately, is not viable here in this encounter. So if you are a melee build, switch to a different weapon temporarily, and then go back to your regular playstyle for the rest of the raid. So you will need to utilize ranged weaponry and tactics to take on this boss. With all that out of the way, the mechanic here for this boss is this. The Guardian has a shield generator attached to its back that completely protects it from all incoming damage. 100% of all damaging attacks will not go through and will not actually hurt the Guardian's health bar while this shield generator is up. The strategy for this room that I found most effective is this. You should have your full group of 4 split into 2 groups of 2. Being exactly on opposite sides of the room from each other like you see here in the video. Doing this will ensure at least one group is always damaging the generator on the bot's back, as the bot will be continuously cycling its aggro and targeting at least one player on one of these 2 groups, leaving itself open from attack from behind by the other group. So the players being targeted are recommended to hide in and out of the cover behind the cement walls if you are struggling to stay alive. After all, these things are here for your safety, while the other group is vatsing or free aiming at the shield generator on the Guardian's back. Doing this strategy is the most effective way I've found, takes it out fairly quickly, and it always ensures that the whole group has a job to do. The 2 groups will be cycling their jobs, but mainly one group will be taking aggro and the other will be damaging the shield generator. It's clear cut and simple and it works fairly well. Helpful tips for this situation. The generator does count as a limb, so it can be targeted in VATS to easily break it down or cripple it, as I'll say in air quotes. And since it can be crippled, that means it can be more easily damaged with weapons that have high crippling potential, such as shotguns, pepper shakers, any heavy gun, or some multi-shot rifles if you have the right perks. Basically, you'll break this shield generator down much quicker if you are able to make attempts to cripple said generator in VATS. Okay, now that that's explained, what happens once the shield is broken, or crippled? Well, now you'll have a period of time to deal your damage directly to the Guardian. The shield is removed from the Guardian, and at the same time, you'll notice that one of the 3 blast doors on the outside of the room is open. This can either be door A, B, or C, but more on that in a second. Now, this fight is basically a massive DPS check to make sure that you're prepared for the whole raid. So you'll have to get your team to work on taking down the Guardian's health bar in a timely manner. So at least a third of the health bar needs to be taken out each time you break the shield generator, or you will fail this DPS check and this boss fight. So basically, once the shield generator is broken, your team should rush to be standing in front of the now open blast door, once again either A, B, or C, and just hammer down the Guardian with all you can, and work on taking down that health bar at least a third at a time. So this first time that the shield generator goes down, a third of that health bar or more should ideally be taken out. For the best results, I recommend that you VATS aim at the torso and use fast-firing, high-damage weapons like the Fixer, Gauss miniguns, or plasma weaponry. Now, what I was saying before, once the shield generator is down, you'll have time to deal your damage. After a certain amount of time, the room will start to heat up from the Guardian, and you must all go and rush inside of one of the blast room doors before the door closes and the heating up process ends, or else anyone left outside the blast door will immediately die and burn up from the heating. From here, it is just rinse and repeating. The same process 2 more times for each of the 3 doors. Break the shield generator, ideally by standing in the positions I recommend. Once broken, move in front of the next blast door that was opened, then focus fire on the Guardian and take his health bar out as much as you can. Like I said, ideally a third of the health bar each time this happens. Then you hop inside the blast room before the heating of the room finishes, rinse and repeat 1 final time, if you were able to deal enough damage. Like I said, you'll only get 3 blast rooms to save you. If the Guardian is not dead by the end of the 3rd blast door opening, then you'll get 1 final chance to take out the shield generator and take out the Guardian's health bar before the 4th and final heating up of the room commences. If that process starts before you've killed the Guardian, then I'm sorry, you've failed, you will die. There is no more blast room doors to open up and no more rooms to save you from the heat that the Guardian will produce. So this is why I say that you will need to take out the Guardian's health a third at a time ideally. You do have a little bit of wiggle room after the 3rd time to take it out, but you must take it out before the 4th heating up of the room starts. Like I said, you'll only get 3 blast rooms to save you, so if you aren't able to take out the Guardian before that 4th heating up process, then you will fail this boss fight, and that means you don't have enough damage to complete this boss fight or the rest of the raid. Seriously, that's what it means. The whole purpose of this first boss fight is to ensure the player understands straight away that you need a certain level of damage output and a certain level of tankiness to survive what is to come in the future for this raid. It's also here to introduce the concept of one-shot mechanics and phases in general. So yeah, that's the first encounter and all its mechanics fully explained. Now let's move on to the next one. Next is the Ultragenetic Mole Miner room, where we will fill up the drill with fuel to break into the Enclave facility. Now this whole room is less about damage output or damage mitigation for the player. Forget what you learned from the previous boss fight basically. This one is all about being quick, patient, and avoiding a massively annoying one-shot mechanic. So firstly, we have this fuel station here, located in this room. This room is basically a safe room from the one-shot mechanic, the Ultragenetic Mole Miner, which I'll explain later. These mole miners cannot enter this room, so like I said, this is a safe room for you guys. However, this is where the regular mole miners will be constantly swarming to try and destroy the drill that we are trying to fuel up. This part I'm looking at right here is where we will be bringing the fuel and inserting it once we find fuel in the caverns outside the safe room, that I'll show you guys in a moment. And outside the safe room are these back tunnels. You will find fuel that looks like this. You can only carry 1 at a time, so make your blitz for some fuel and rush back to the station to fill up the tank. The method here is simple. Have 1 guy, or maybe 2 guys if you're really struggling, to stay back here in the safe room and protect the drill from the regular mole miners and explosive landmine mole rats. The guys that stay back here have a relatively safe but very important job to do. If the drill is destroyed, then you cannot progress in the raid, so ensure it's protected well. I recommend jumping up to high vantage points and using some type of weapon that deals large AoE damage, like an auto grenade launcher or maybe a Tesla rifle, or any explosive secondary starred heavy weapon you may be using, like a LMG, Gatling plasma, or Gauss minigun. Basically, use anything that can easily wipe out hordes over and over again without issue. I want you guys to make note that the mole miners that are attacking the drill do get progressively more and more powerful as the time goes on in this stage, and eventually they will look almost identical to the ultragenetic mole miners, but they will not be those mole miners, so they're not invincible and they don't one-shot you, they just look similar. So yeah, eventually they will get tougher and tougher and deal more damage to the drill. So yeah, at the start they are very weak and then they progress to be tougher and tougher. So at the start it may be beneficial to leave the drill unprotected at the start and have all available players run for fuel. Then once you get the notifications on your screen that the mole miners are getting stronger, then you can revert back and have your 1 or 2 players in position to defend the drill. That's also a very nice strategy that I recommend trying out if you're a little bit more experienced in this stage. Alright, and while that single person or duo is protecting, the other 2 or 3 players have a very difficult job to do. They must run through these back caverns and get the fuel I mentioned earlier. Like I said, 1 fuel per player at a time. Here on screen is a fantastic visual map created by Cat, Coffee, and Mapalachia. Shout out to them for creating this and allowing me to provide it for you guys. This shows you all possible locations for the fuel to spawn, marked with a red crosshair. There are 3 fuel canisters in the entry rail tunnel section, which is A. There are 4 in section B, then there are 3 in section C, 9 in section D, and 4 more in section E. So I recommend that you guys study this map and become accustomed to the cavern layout. Try and remember what each section is called and relate that to the actual in-game room so you can put map to game and actually try and remember where the fuel canisters are located. It's just trial and error and being extremely patient as you use communication to grab the fuel one by one as a team. The only problem here is, unfortunately, there are up to 4 special variants of the mole miners called the Ultragenetic Stalkers, as I mentioned earlier. These miners have been experimented on heavily with Ultracite and are now completely immune to all damage you can dish out to them. Seriously, you cannot hurt them, cripple them, or kill them, so don't even try. However, you can stagger them, so if you have any means to produce a stagger, either by a shredding minigun or just being lucky with a bash of your regular weapon, or maybe you want to use some melee, however you want to dish out a stagger, it is possible to do that and buy yourself precious seconds to avoid the mole miner. On top of that, they have incredibly powerful drill fists that is intended to one-shot kill you, no matter what. That's literally the mechanic here. It doesn't matter how powerful you are or how tanky you are not able to kill them or take shots for them. In saying that though, you can get incredibly lucky from things like Power Armor Reboot, Evasive or Serendipity to completely avoid incoming damage, but that is very unlikely and percent based. I still recommend to just run away from them completely. The encounter is supposed to feel like a horror game, like you're running from Jason or Michael Myers. Don't get close to them and avoid them at all costs. Like I said, use tactics, communication, study the map, and be patient. You'll need to collect 15 fuel canisters in total to fully fuel up the drill. So to recap, 1 or 2 guys will defend the drill, and the rest of your team will run the caverns and work towards getting 15 fuel, dodging and weaving around the stalkers. And remember, it is possible to leave the drill completely unguarded at the start for a while and have your whole team running and collecting fuel, as that will give you a handy boost at the start while things are nice and easy. As things get more progressively difficult, then go back to defending the drill. Remember guys, screenshot and save that map to help easily find the fuel and learn the cavern's layout. Good luck. Okay, the next encounter, we find ourselves in the Enclave base and facing up against Enclave Squad Epsilon. Said to be heavily experimented soldiers, now scorched, donning armor very reminiscent to Frank Horrigan. There are 3 soldiers, Bloodhound, Lynx, and Vulture. Bloodhound wields a laser chainsaw and will follow players relentlessly around with it, dealing massive amounts of melee damage. Avoid him if you can. Lynx, however, carries a cryogenic auto grenade launcher that drains your AP and slows you down. This dude's a problem and is who I would recommend to be the highest priority target. Finally, we have Vulture, who has a powerful Gauss rifle, dealing massive amounts of single-shot long-range damage to players at a distance. Both Bloodhound and Vulture are manageable and you can tank them if your build is good enough. However, Lynx is next level, painful, and hard to deal with because he's just constantly slowing down your whole team and preventing you from running away, doing what you need to do. Like I said, he's a problem. Don't get me wrong, all three of these guys are powerful, and they can take you out pretty quickly if you're not paying attention or if you're not as prepared as you might think you need to be. Lynx in particular is very annoying, and like I said, he's who I recommend we should take out first. Okay, so the mechanic here is this. All three soldiers are immune to damage because there are 3 ultragenetic shield generators around the room. As a team, you must work together to have 1 or 2 players babysit these soldiers and take their aggro, while the rest of the team breaks and destroys these generators. You can see around the room areas designated generator A, B, and C. You will notice some lights above these letters of the rooms. If the light of the room is white, then the generator is healed up and active, and keeping all of the soldiers from taking damage. If it is red though, then that means the generator is broken and destroyed. So keep an eye out on these lights to easily indicate which generator you need to target and destroy. Once all 3 are destroyed, then the fun begins. Not only will you now be able to take out the Epsilon squad, but now repair iBots will also begin to spawn in to repair the generators you just destroyed. And they can repair them almost instantaneously. And the second even one generator gains a sliver of health back, then all of the soldiers become immune to damage once again. So it is recommended for you to do it like this. After trial and error, I've found that the best way to deal with them is to have a full team communicating and doing this. Have one player constantly roaming the center of the room, ideally the tankiest one, and have him take the aggro of all the soldiers. And then you'll have the remaining 3 players stand in front of the entrance to their respective generator rooms. So one player stands in front of room A, the other in front of B, and then the last one in front of room C. The purpose of this is to get each player responsible for their own generator room, and then each player can easily stop and kill any repair iBots before they enter the room and start their repairs on the generator. So yeah, 3 players have complete responsibility for their own 3 generators, and then that 4th player is just in the middle, hopefully taking aggro and trying to control the entire squad and put them in the center so that they're not really interrupting the other 3 players' jobs. From these positions, those 3 players should easily be able to still deal sustainable amounts of damage on the soldiers when the shields are down, and they can easily turn around and destroy the iBots before they repair the generators. This is what's been easiest for me when I was on the PTS, and it's what I recommend for you guys. To recap, one tank player draws aggro in the middle, the other players defend their generators and periodically deal damage to the soldiers when they get a chance to. Now, if you do not have a player that's capable of tanking the squad and drawing aggro in the middle all by himself, then the next best method here is to have 2 players do this. Get those 2 players to draw aggro in the middle and kind of babysit them. Obviously, these 2 players will need to heal each other up with Team Medic, maybe a medic's weapon, or conductors, whatever you have at your disposal. Just keep focus on healing each other up. These 2 remaining players will be switching between destroying the generators and iBots and gaining brief moments of time where they can damage the soldiers. Unfortunately, doing it this way, there will pretty much always be one generator that gets repaired a little bit, so you'll have to go take care of that and then come back to the fight for the Enclave, and then rinse and repeat. It can be rough, but like I said, it's entirely doable. From there, we have the next encounter, the Ultragenetic Horde room. This room is all about tactics and communication. The mechanic here is quite simple, but hard to accomplish. Basically, you'll see all of these green crystals around the room. Don't destroy them because you'll need them. In a few moments, once the button's pressed, another invincible one-shotting Ultragenetic Mole Miner Stalker will enter the arena and try to kill you guys. These crystals are the only thing that can hurt him. Here's the twist. Not only are you limited in the amount of crystals you have, you also have a horde of weaker ultragenetic creatures like deathclaws, rats, wolves, and more to deal with. Again, these creatures also can only be harmed and killed by the green crystals blowing up. Fortunately though, these creatures do not one-shot you. They deal a regular amount of damage like you would find them in the wild. So the mechanic here is this. You must focus on the Mole Miner first, as he's the only one that can one-shot your team. He's the only real threat here. The rest of the Horde are just a distraction. So you will have to lead the Mole Miner and members of the Horde to stand close by to the crystals. Once nearby, you or another player must shoot out and destroy the crystal. It will then explode and deal a large chunk of AoE damage to the Mole Miner and other Horde creatures. There are 3 very large crystals in the room, one in the very center front console, and one on either side of the room hanging from the ceiling. You guessed it, the larger crystals deal much more damage in a much larger radius. So with that being said, my preferred method of dealing with this horde is this. I will allow a lot of the horde to group up and stick close by the mole miner stalker, and I will use the largest crystals first on them. Now I'll only use 2 of these large crystals at the start. It's important that you save the third and final large crystal for emergencies at the very end in case you mess up later on. Okay, so it's important also to wait until a large amount of horde has grouped up before I decide to pop the crystal. If I do it too early, then I've just wasted a large crystal on a single enemy, or only on a few enemies. With only 2 large crystals that we are going to allow ourselves to use, I want to get the most bang for my buck and take out as many creatures as I can, while at the same time dealing as much damage as I can to the mole miner. Once the 2 large crystals are used, if you guys have done it right and been patient, then the horde should be mostly taken care of, and the mole miner should be very close to death. Now is where you will slowly lead the mole miner and any other members of the horde to the smaller crystals and slowly take his health down to 0 by use of one of the small crystals at a time. Eventually he will go down, and depending on if you guys messed up or maybe you weren't quite as accurate with your crystal leading as you thought, you may be out of crystals and you may still have a few members of the horde to take care of. This is where our final emergency large crystal comes into play. So just take your remaining members of the Ultragenetic Horde over to the large crystal, blow it up, that should be it. Done and dusted, simple and easy. Using 2 very large crystals at the start to take out the Ultragenetic mole miner's health a lot more efficiently, as well as a larger chunk of the overall horde, then use smaller crystals to take out the mole miner and finish him off, and then if you don't have any smaller crystals left, use the final large one on the rest of the horde. Simply, this is the best method. Leave 1 large crystal for emergencies and use it to take out the rest of the horde in case you need it. That's what I do, and it works every time without fail. Easy and no drama. Now let's move on to the next one. Now this brings us to the final stage, the Ultracite Terror boss, the Ultragenetic snake named Butch. Much like the first boss, this is a DPS check as well, so it's pretty straightforward here, honestly. Your whole team goes onto the center platform, the snake comes out, and the fight begins. There are no one-shot mechanics or invincibility mechanics, just a straight-up dogfight. Like most enemies, you will deal bonus damage if you target the head. However, you deal even more bonus damage when you are targeting the Terror's eyes. So if you can try and aim for that to get this fight over as quickly as possible and deal the most damage, that would be the winning strategy. However, if you do want to be a little bit strategic and potentially combat the Terror as a melee player, you will have to cripple the snake's body, the plates. Each time a plate is crippled, the Terror will become stunned for a brief moment of time and rest its head down on the platform. This is advantageous for 2 reasons. 1, it allows melee builds to get in on the fight and deal massive amounts of unarmed or melee damage. And 2, it allows you to get a more accurate shot at the eyes, whether you're using VATS or free aiming, so you'll have an easier time hitting these extremely delicate, weak spots on the snake. And additionally, while the snake is down and stunned, that means it cannot attack you with its plethora of damaging abilities. Alright, so beyond dealing damage to the Terror, the mechanic is this. The snake will periodically spit out a seeking AoE acid projectile. When it does, just do your best to avoid it and heal through its damage, and also make sure to avoid the pool of damaging acid it leaves behind on the floor. It will also do an acidic spray attack. This one can be dodged and healed through as well. These 2 attacks can take a massive chunk of your health down, especially if you're bloodied, it can potentially one-shot you. So I do recommend raising your health gate a little bit to at least half health or become a full health player for this fight if you are struggling with the acid projectiles. They can one-shot you, which is also why I recommend having a high poison resistance for this fight. It's very advantageous to get that number up as high as you possibly can. Also, one of its other attacks, periodically the snake will lunge outward and bite at your team. This is unavoidable and attacks the whole island, so just prepare for it and heal through it, and try not to let it knock you off of the island. Then finally, the last main attack from the snake is a roar/screech attack. This will send shockwaves towards your team and actually push you backwards a substantial amount of distance, so if you're not careful, it may push you into the green lava, which I'm sure doesn't need to be mentioned but will instantly kill you. So don't go swimming in the green, you'll die. That's basically it for the Terror's main moveset. It's got 2 types of poison ranged attacks. It has a lunged melee type attack, and then it has a raw stunning attack that can push you straight off of the island. You can heal through everything if you are tanky enough. However, if you aren't, they can potentially one-shot you if you are bloodied or just low health from the fight. So yeah, that's basically all the moves. Just attack and survive and heal. Eventually you'll do enough damage to the snake and the next phase will begin. The next phase involves the tail of the snake popping up around the island. Now, it's incredibly important that you stop what you're doing ASAP and deal with this tail as soon as it pops up. Shoot at it and destroy it / damage it whenever it pops up, because if you don't, then the tail will smash the island and break it down bit by bit, making the island smaller and smaller and slowly crumble it into nothing. Obviously, once that happens, it will wipe your whole squad. So yeah, it's pretty simple here for the final boss fight, nothing crazy mechanic wise, you're not under any time crunch or looking for any secondary objectives or avoiding any meticulously frustrating one-shot mechanics. You're just simply dealing as much damage as you possibly can to the snake, surviving its attacks, and whenever its tail pops up, ensure you take it out as quickly as possible. The only real things to worry about here are the tail, because if you leave it alone, like I said, it will destroy your island. And like I said earlier, the only other thing to really worry about is the poison damage. Like I said, it's highly recommended to get some poison resistance, either by use of funky duds, poison legendary effects, or union power armor. These all can help a lot with the acidic attacks from the snake. I recommend to deal with this encounter easiest, all players stick towards the very middle of the island or slightly closer to the side of the island where the snake is currently located. This will make it harder for the snake to push you off the island with its sonic screech attacks. And I've found that it's easiest to have one single person on your team whose sole purpose it is to look for the tail and constantly scan for it and take it out as soon as it pops up. And he will alert the rest of the group so it can be dealt with. The 3 other players on your team can just solely focus towards the snake, either by just purposefully focusing on the eyes dealing maximum damage, or by crippling the plates, plate A, B, C, D, so on and so forth, crippling each plate one by one to then stun the snake and force it onto the island so that you can deal more damage that way onto the eyes. Either way you deal with it, it's quite simple really, and it's a really fun fight. So that's it, the end boss fight is really straightforward. Okay, and with all of that said and done, this has been the total and ultimate guide for each mechanic, phase, and encounter in the Gleaming Depths raid. I hope this guide helped you deal with this hard, challenging content. If it didn't and you're still struggling, please check out my channel and build videos and make the necessary changes to become more of a min-maxed build today. Trust me, you won't regret it. If this guide did help you out, please share it amongst the community for anyone that is struggling, as just having each phase and encounter and mechanic explained to them may help out a great deal. I will have plenty of guides covering the Gleaming Depths in the coming days, so be on the lookout for that. With all that said, let's roll the outro, guys. That's going to do it for me. A massive shout out to all of my channel members. You're all legends, and thank you for your continued support on the channel. If you like what I do here and you'd like to support me further, then consider becoming a member or check out my merch store. We've got a lot of great designs and benefits, so be sure to check that out in the description. And while you're down there, chuck me a follow on my other social medias and join my Discord. Subscribe if you're new and like the video if you've enjoyed. I've been Tia, and I'll catch us in the next one. Welcome to Valhalla.